Hi, my name is Vanessa Petronic, and I completed my Capstone project exploring pediatric feeding therapy within the outpatient setting. Today, I will be discussing the background, purpose, objectives, methods, results, impact, and avenues for sustainability related to my project. The literature states that some potential causes of picky eating behaviors include the child experiencing prior feeding difficulties early in life and having sensory sensitivities. Consequences that can result from picky eating behaviors include the child having inadequate nutritional intake, hindered growth, and risk for being underweight. To address picky eating behaviors, interventions such as the sequential oral sensory approach have been found to significantly improve the child's mealtime behaviors, growth, and weight. When writing my professional needs assessment, I found that my professional goals include working in an outpatient pediatric clinic, gaining competency in multiple specialty areas. Additionally, after speaking with my site mentor, Lindsay Brinkman, I discovered the primary intervention approach used to address picky eating behaviors is the SOS approach. She also emphasized that their clinic needs more resources related to feeding to better support future students and therapists in their journeys of gaining competency in feeding therapy. The results from my professional needs assessment led me to pursue advanced clinical practice as the focus area of my Capstone project, gaining competency in feeding therapy. My professional needs assessment also shaped my project objectives. In addition to gaining competency in feeding therapy, I wanted to gain foundational knowledge in the SOS approach, as this was mentioned as the primary intervention approach used in outpatient settings. Finally, I plan to obtain and synthesize knowledge on important developmental milestones for feeding. I completed my Capstone project at ABC Pediatric Therapy Network, an outpatient pediatric clinic located in Cincinnati, Ohio. My site mentor was Lindsay Brinkman, who is one of the clinic's directors and is at the top of this facility's feeding ladder. My feeding caseload consisted of children with picky eating behaviors primarily due to sensory-based aversions. I saw children between the ages of 1 and 4 years old. To develop competency in feeding therapy, I observed my site mentor in practice, conducted my own feeding evaluations and interventions, and incorporated my mentor's feedback into practice. To obtain knowledge in feeding concepts and approaches, including the SOS approach, I read books, watched webinars, and observed my site mentor in practice. I synthesized the knowledge that I gained and created a training resource on feeding therapy that I could reference during my experience and that was also shared with the clinic. To gain knowledge on feeding developmental milestones, I found reliable websites and organized the information by developmental age. I then created a resource guide on feeding milestones for my own reference during my Capstone experience and for the future benefit of students and practitioners at this clinic. The deliverables I created to show evidence of meeting my learning objectives are as follows. For my first objective of gaining clinical competency, my site mentor completed 3 entrustability scales throughout my experience that show improvement in my feeding therapy skills over time. Additionally, I received a certificate of achievement stating that I have been checked off on level 3 competency for feeding therapy according to this clinic's standards. For my second objective of gaining knowledge in feeding therapy concepts, I created 17 pages of notes and 7 self-reflections after engaging with educational materials on feeding. I also created a 35-page training resource on feeding therapy for my own benefit during my Capstone experience and also for the benefit of future students. For my third objective of obtaining knowledge on feeding developmental milestones, I created a resource that organizes milestones according to postural, oral motor, and sensory skills related to feeding. I also created a reference list of the 5 sources I used to create this resource for future students and practitioners to refer to as needed. I disseminated the knowledge and work I created during my Capstone project by sharing my feeding training resource and feeding developmental milestones resource with the clinic where I completed my Capstone experience. My Capstone project directly relates to my career goals. My project helped me gain clinical competency and skills in feeding therapy, which supports my professional goals of working in an outpatient pediatric clinic post-graduation, specializing in feeding therapy. By sharing the training and milestone resources with this clinic, future students and practitioners can more easily obtain the knowledge needed to become competent in feeding therapy. This means that more occupational therapists will be qualified to provide feeding therapy services for children and families in need going forward. To ensure the work I have started carries forward and remains relevant, the resources I have created could be included as part of the onboarding package for students and new practitioners at ABC Pediatric Therapy. By making these resources immediately known and accessible, individuals have the opportunity to start building their knowledge and competency in feeding therapy. Additionally, future students have the opportunity to add information to these resources that may not have been addressed or expanded upon in depth. And given that these resources currently exist in the form of a typed document, future students could transform these resources into mini podcast episodes. This would better support auditory learners and add an element of convenience by allowing students and practitioners to listen to this material on their commute to and from work. By progressing this project and creating another avenue for accessing this information, future individuals may be more inclined to interact with this content, ensuring that continued engagement with the work I have started will be possible for years ahead. Thank you so much for listening to my Capstone presentation. I have included my email on this last slide, and I would love to connect if you have further questions.